The walls of Jericho. We're going to talk about obedience over understanding. Welcome back to another episode of During Bible Study Podcast, where we deep dive into lessons in the Bible and apply them to our daily lives. I'm your host, Steve Kitts. Today we're going to explore one of the most famous stories of faith and obedience in the Bible, the fall of the walls of Jericho. Most importantly, we'll focus on why God's commands, even when it doesn't make sense, is always the best course of action. Have you ever felt like God is leading you in a direction that you didn't see logically? Maybe He's calling you into a new job, a new location, or even a challenging situation that seems impossible to overcome. The story of Jericho teaches us a powerful lesson. Victory comes not from our own strength or reasoning, but from trusting in God and obeying. Now here's what happened with the story of the wall of Jericho. The Israelites had been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, led by Moses and then Joshua. Finally, they were about to enter into the promised land. But there was a problem. Jericho. It was a heavily fortified city with massive walls. We have seen some scholars that even say that it was on top of a mountain, sort of raised up in the sky, so it's hard to get to, plus the high walls. The raised castle would only have to be reached one way in, one way out in most cases. From a human standpoint, the Israelites had no chance of breaking through, but God had a plan. Now, if you remember your stories, Joshua was a military leader, led a lot of defense attacks and attacks against the enemy with God's help to protect the Israelites while they were wandering in that 40 years. He was a great leader. He'd seen many battles and likely knew strategies that could attack the city of Jericho. However, God did not ask him to use military tactics. Instead, God gave him a strange command: march around the city for 7 days, and on the seventh day, march 7 times and then shout. Now, this doesn't make sense logically, but Joshua obeyed. He knew enough of God to obey God. Let's look exactly what the commandment that God gave Joshua in Joshua 6, verses 2 through 5. See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. And on the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast from the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse and the army will go up, everyone straight in. From a military standpoint, this is nonsense. This is crazy. Joshua was the leader because of his military skills and training. But faith was not about to make sense to any of us. But trusting God and His wisdom does. The Israelites had a choice: follow their own reasoning and attack with military might, or trust God completely. Despite how unusual the plan sounded, Joshua and the Israelites, they obeyed. Now imagine this scene. Day after day, they marched in silence. The army marched around 6 days, one time around the walled city, and they would hear the people of Jericho likely mocking them and making fun of them, standing on the wall and thinking that they're protected, that they're taken care of. The Israelite soldiers must have wondered, what are we doing? But they continued because obeying God is more important than understanding. Finally, on that 7th day, they marched 7 times. When the trumpets blasted, the people shouted, the massive walls came tumbling down. The shout of over 1,000,000 people, that was powerful. The Israelites charged in and claimed the city without military might just because God had promised it to them. What if Joshua had ignored God's instructions and attacked the walls like he would with human tactics? Or what if they gave up on the 6th day and said, "This is foolish walking around, we're not going to do it anymore"? Or even on the 6th lap, on that 7th day, if they stopped and not done the 7th lap, the walls would have remained standing, and they'd missed out on their blessing and their victory. This story teaches us that obedience, when we know that it seems irrational, can lead to a victory. God's ways are higher than our ways, and that's Isaiah 55:8-9. He sees the whole picture when we can only see a fraction of it. How does this apply to us today? Maybe God's asking you to step out in faith, or tithe some money when money's tight. Forgive when it's hard, or wait when you want to move. Over everything, trust Him. Trust God. The walls of your life will fall when you obey, when you do what He asks you to do, even the ones that look impossible to overcome. Faith is believing when you really fully don't understand. Just like the Israelites had to march around for 7 days before seeing results. Trust that process. God's victories can bring Him glory, and not us. See the walls that fell by His power and not by human power. The same is true in our lives. When we obey, God fights for us. The Israelites didn't have to attack the walls. God brought them down. When we trust and obey, He fights our battles. God knows what He's doing and how to do it. Now here's my closing thoughts. What walls are you facing today? Maybe it's a personal struggle, a relationship, financial issues, or a spiritual battle. I encourage you, stop trying to figure it out on your own. Listen to God. Follow His instructions, even when it seems unconventional. This will require you to stop what you're doing and listen for instructions. Sometimes we're too busy doing everything we want to do instead of getting direction from God. Just as He brought down the walls of Jericho, a walled fortress, He can bring down the walls in your life. Trust Him, obey Him, and watch Him work. Well, thank you for joining me on this episode of During Bible Study Podcast. I've been your host, Steve Kitts. If this message has blessed you, share it with a friend. Stay in the Word. Be usable. Stay in faith. And remember that God's way is the best way. Until next time, bless you, brothers and sisters. In Jesus' holy name, amen. I want to take a minute to talk to you about Buzzsprout. Today is a great day to start your own podcast. Whether you're looking for a new market or a channel, may I suggest that you share your thoughts and your ideas with the world. And it's just so fun to have a talk show. Podcasting is very easy, inexpensive, and a fun way to expand your reach online. Buzzsprout is hands down the easiest and best way to launch, promote, and track your podcast. Your show can be online and listed in major podcast directories like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and many more within minutes of finishing each recording. Podcasting isn't hard when you have the right partners, and a team that they have at Buzzsprout is passionate in helping you succeed. They want you to succeed. Join with over 100,000 podcasters already using Buzzsprout to get their message out to the world. Let's go ahead and create something together. God bless you.